You're listening to Expounding the Word, the teachings of Pastor Chris Wimberly of Sala Hills Church in Central Texas.
You know that evil has a lid on it right now because the church exists. Because what do we do as the church? We speak life, we speak love, we show grace, we season our conversation with grace, full of salt, we show compassion, we speak against evil. The church has power on planet Earth, amen? The restrainer is here, and so evil has a lid on it. Even though evil exists, it has a lid. But when the restrainer is removed, when the bride is raptured, then the lawless one will be revealed, and then we enter the 7-year tribulation period.
One of the greatest comforts you can have in your home is air conditioning. Instead of being hot and humid in the summer, you can enjoy a cool house. But if your AC goes down, your space will begin to get hot and uncomfortable again. Pastor Chris reminds you today that the church is the world's thermostat, because God's people call out the evil that lurks beneath the surface. But after the rapture, Satan and his forces will have free reign over the world, and that's when the tribulation will take place. Now here's Pastor Chris in the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 15 with today's edition of Expounding the Word.
So we know that the world will go through difficult times as we get closer, but what will society be like? Well, Jesus tells us it will be like the days of Noah and the days of Lot. Let's look at those two scriptures. In Matthew 24, Jesus says this, "But as the days of Noah were, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and given in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark and did not know until the flood came and took them all away, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. Then 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken and the other left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and the other left." So he talks about Noah. He says during the times of Noah, the flood was approaching, but people just kept on living normal life as if it wasn't. And there's some really cool Greek studies there too, where you can look at the different Greek words of the ones he took away via protected in the ark versus the ones that he took away via the wrath and the flood. There's a lot of Greek cool stuff there that points to the rapture. But also in the days of Lot, look at this in Luke 17. Jesus says, "Likewise, as it was also in the days of" who? Lot. "They ate, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they built. But on the day that the Lord went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all." So let me just pause there and synthesize all that for you. Jesus says, when I come back, when you look around the world, you're going to see things that look like the days of Noah and the days of Lot. And if you go back and you study Genesis and you look at the days of Noah and the days of Lot, there's a couple themes. One is there was sexual weirdness that was going rampant on planet Earth, and there was violence that was growing rampant on planet Earth, and it just became normal. People were just okay with it in the days of Noah and the days of Lot. And so what did God do? He poured out wrath. He judged that. And so likewise, Jesus is saying, we're going to get to a period in time where violence is going to increase, lawlessness is going to increase, and there'll be sexual strange things, and society is just going to make that normal. People will go on eating and drinking, marrying as if it's not a big deal, and then the wrath will come, the judgment will come. We're seeing these things in our society today, if we're just being honest and blunt and real about it. But here's what Jesus says regarding it in Matthew 24:42. He says, "Watch therefore, for you do not know what hour your Lord is coming." Jesus says, be looking because I'm coming back. And he says, you don't know when, which means what? I can come back at any moment. The imminent return of Christ. Now, in regards to the rapture itself, there's beautiful Jewish theology. And if you look at the New Testament, there's wedding verses everywhere. You know, the first miracle Jesus did was at a wedding in Cana, turned the water into wine, awesome wedding, right? Wedding stuff is all throughout the Bible, especially the New Testament when it talks about Christ being the groom and the church being his bride. It's all throughout the New Testament. And if you studied Jewish weddings, especially up in Galilee area, they had a very specific way they would do the wedding. First, you would start with the arrangement, the betrothal. And so the parents would be involved, and husband and wife or groom and bride, future groom and bride would be presented, and there would be an agreement and a dowry. A price would be paid. And that was as if you're married. The contract is there. You just have to do some other steps. And Jesus, he came and he paid the what? The price. When he hung on the cross and he said, "It is finished," in the Greek, it means paid in full. He paid the dowry. He paid the price. And therefore, we are contractually married to Jesus. He's the groom. The church is his bride. But then in a Jewish wedding, after the betrothal, The groom would have a job and the bride would have a job. The groom's job would be to go and prepare a place. He would go add a house onto his dad's house. And so a simple verse here where Jesus says this in John 14, he says, I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. So the groom goes and prepares a place. That's what Jesus is doing. But what is the bride's job? Well, the bride's job is to be ready at any moment, to adorn herself and to have what in her lamp? Oil in her lamp. Look at a simple verse here from the wise virgins in Matthew 25:4. The wise took oil in their vessels with their lamps. They were ready at any moment for the groom to call them. Now, this is something that's foreign for us because today, ladies, when you get married, you want to plan your wedding date. You want to plan who's going to be at your wedding. Back then, you didn't know your wedding date. How do you feel about that? Didn't know your wedding date? Talk about anxiety. You just don't know. You just got to be ready because at any moment, the groom is going to come and he's going to get his bride and it's time for the wedding feast. And so this is awesome. Look at this I just picture Bridezilla. I don't know the date. But in Matthew 25, verse 6 and verse 10, it says, at midnight a cry was heard. Behold, the bridegroom is coming. Go out to meet him. And those who were ready went in with him to the wedding, and the door was shut. Matthew 25:11. Afterward, the other virgins came also, saying, Lord, Lord, open to us. But he answered and said, assuredly, I say to you, I do not know you. Those are sobering verses. Matthew 25:13. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour in which the Son of Man is coming. The groom is preparing a place. What's our job as the church? To have oil in our lamps. Oil is a picture of the Holy Spirit. Are you following God? Are you loving people? Are you trusting the Spirit? Are you sharing the gospel? Oil in your lamp because you don't know when he's coming back, and he could come back at any moment. And then when he does come back, we go to the marriage supper of the Lamb. Look at Revelation 19. Let us be glad and rejoice and give him glory, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his wife has made herself ready. Then he said to me, right, blessed are those who are called to the marriage supper of the Lamb. That day is coming. Friends, I can't wait to go feast with the Lord for all of eternity. I can't wait for the bride, the church, to go and be with the groom for all of eternity. However, the doors will be shut and not all will be welcome. Do you know Christ? Do you know him? Have you confessed him as Lord of your life? It is so important. Now, I do want to shift for a brief moment, and we won't spend long on this because there's way too much to talk about today. You could spend many sermons on this. The 70 weeks of Daniel is important because we've looked at a little bit at the rapture. We're going to talk about the 70 weeks of Daniel, and then we're going to talk about Israel. That's today's message. And in the 70 weeks of Daniel, Daniel is given a vision over 2,500 years ago of an end times timeline, a prophetic timeline of how things will play out. So we'll just look at it very briefly. I'm going to read the last 4 verses of Daniel 9, each of them one by one. So this is Daniel 9:24. He says, 70 weeks are determined for your people. How many weeks? 70. For your people and for your holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up vision and prophecy. How many weeks? 70. Now, when we use the word week today, we use it differently. A better word for us today would be decade. A decade is a period of how many years? 10. But in Jewish theology, when they said week, it meant any period of 7. 7 days, 7 weeks, 7 years. In this case, a week is 7 years. So 70 times 7 is 490 years. So Daniel's receiving a literal vision from the Lord that's literally going to come true, and the time period is 490 years. And there's a start date and there's an end date, and there's stuff that happens in between. If you look at Daniel 9:25, it says this, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. And if you add years into that, which is the math, you get 49 years and 434 years. You add it all up, you get 483 years. So it starts when there's a decree to rebuild Jerusalem, and that leads up to a certain point 483 years later. Now, later we'll dig deeper on this. We don't have time today, but if you do the math in the Hebrew calendar, and you go back to Nehemiah chapter 2 on the exact day that King Artaxerxes issued the decree for Nehemiah to go rebuild the city of Jerusalem, and you add all those days up, you land on the exact day that Jesus rode into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, riding in the triumphal entry, to the day. 483 years to the day. And so these are beautiful things. In verse 26, it says this, but after the 62 weeks, what will happen to the Messiah? Be cut off, crucified, but not for himself. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. And they've been trying to do that ever since. So Jesus would ride in on the prophesied day to Jerusalem, and the Messiah would be cut off, not for himself. He would be crucified for the sins of the world. And then in verse 27, the final one, it says, then he shall confirm a covenant with many. For how long? 1 week. But in the middle of the week, he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abominations shall be one who makes desolate. We got to pause there. There's a pause here. There's a divine pause in God's holy calendar because Jesus came on the prophesied day and he was cut off. He was crucified. And he came to his own people, the people of Israel, and they rejected him. He came to his own. It says in John chapter 1, his own did not receive him. The groom came for his bride, and the bride said, we don't want you. And so he was cut off. And at that time, Israel was forsaken, at least for a moment, because God doesn't go back on his covenants. But for a moment, he would then focus on the Gentiles. And any Israelites that want to come can. But the gospel is going to go out to the whole world. And then Jesus is going to come back to deal with Israel once again. But because of Israel's rejection, we are now living in the church age, the divine pause. And here in Daniel 27, it says, then he, speaking of the Antichrist, he will come, he will confirm a covenant for a period of 1 week, which is 7 years, known as the future period of tribulation, 7 years. And during that time, God is going to deal with Israel once again. This is a Jewish book to Jewish people in a Jewish time. And so I'll give you some other verses that will help you understand this even better in just a moment. But we're now living in the divine pause, and the remaining 1 week, the remaining 7 years is yet to come. And these next verses will help you understand, how is the rapture connected to this? It's deeply connected to Israel and the Antichrist. In Daniel 9:27, he says that he will come, the Antichrist will come, and he will do what? Confirm a covenant, a peace treaty with Israel. Then 3.5 years later, halfway through, he will commit the abomination of desolation. He will set up an image of himself. He will defile the temple. And then the last 3.5 years will be very difficult. Wrath on planet Earth. He will go back on his treaty with Israel. That has yet to come. Why has that not happened yet? Because the church is still here. Because we're still here. Let me read for you these 8 verses. They're so important, connected to the rapture and the Antichrist in the book of Daniel. Look at these verses, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 1 through 8. Now, brethren, this is a message for the church, concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our gathering together to him. We ask you not to be soon shaken in mind or troubled, either by spirit or by word or by letter, as if from us, as though the day of Christ had already come. He says, let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first. And the man of sin, that's a reference to the Antichrist, the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshiped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. And now you, church, you know what is restraining, that he may be revealed in his own time, for the mystery of lawlessness is already at work, and he who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way, and then the lawless one will be revealed. This is clear. Right now, the Antichrist, the lawless one, can't do all the things he wants to do because the restrainer is still here. Who is the restrainer? It's the church, operating the power of the Holy Spirit. You know that evil has a lid on it right now because the church exists. Because what do we do as the church? We speak life. We speak love. We show grace. We season our conversation with grace, full of salt. We show compassion. We speak against evil. The church has power on planet Earth, amen? The restrainer is here, and so evil has a lid on it. Even though evil exists, it has a lid. But when the restrainer is removed, when the bride is raptured, then the lawless one will be revealed, and then we enter the 7-year tribulation period. These verses make it clear when connected to Daniel. But what are we to do in the meantime? Well, the gospel account tells us to do business till he comes, to occupy until he returns. What does that mean for the church? We love God, we love people, we preach the gospel, we make disciples. Great commandment, great commission. We just keep doing that, keep doing that, keep doing that until we are removed, and then the tribulation period starts. So let's talk about the tribulation period. It's a 7-year period. It begins with the treaty of Antichrist that is yet to come, and right around that time, there's going to be a battle. It's known as the Battle of Gog and Magog. Great names to name your kids if you're looking for kid names. Or name your hog or your dog, Gog. We're trying to work this out here. Gog and Magog. Gog is a person or a title, and Magog is a place. And later, we're not going to do all this right now. We don't have time. But if you read Ezekiel chapter 38, there's a whole bunch of stuff listed in there and a whole bunch of places. And if you take those words and you make them words in our today's language, we're talking about Russia, Iran, and Turkey being the main players. And right around the time the lawless one will be revealed, right around the time, either before or after, right in there, there's going to be the battle of Gog and Magog. And Russia is going to come down through Syria. Iran is going to be connected, and Turkey is going to be connected, and they're all going to come and fight against Israel. If you look today at the climate today in the Middle East, are you seeing Russia getting involved with Syria and Iran? Yes, for sure. Are you seeing Iran backing Hamas and Hezbollah? Yeah. But this is happening before our very eyes. 100 years ago, Israel didn't even exist as a nation. No one would even know how to really interpret Ezekiel 38. But we're watching it. You guys realize you're living in very interesting times. It's amazing. So during this tribulation period, there's going to be 7 seals, 7 trumpets, and 7 bowls. And as that progression goes on, it's going to get worse and worse and worse, the judgments and the wrath of God. And in the middle, the Antichrist is going to perform the abomination of desolation. Look at Matthew 24, verse 15. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, this is something the Antichrist does, spoken of by who? Daniel. These are Jesus' words. This is all connected. Jesus says, when you see this, spoken by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, for then there will be not just tribulation, but great tribulation. And here's the kind, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be again. The great tribulation. Now, as Christians, we go through tribulation. We go through difficulty. But tribulation is not the same as the tribulation. And halfway through that final 7-year period that starts with the treaty of the Antichrist is the abomination of desolation, where the Antichrist is going to go into the temple in Israel, which means some things have to be redone or rebuilt. And he's going to go in there and he's going to perform an abomination before the Lord. He's going to set up an image of himself. He's going to go back on his covenant with Israel, and that's going to unleash the great tribulation, such as the world has never seen before. And right at that same time, he's going to issue the mark of the beast. If any of you have read Revelation 13, you're familiar with this. Let me just read a couple verses for you. Revelation 13, verse 16. He, speaking of the Antichrist, the beast, causes how many? All, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a what? A mark on their right hand and on their foreheads, that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. So on planet Earth, we're getting close to the time, and when we get to that time, I believe we won't be here for this. The church will be gone, but those remaining will be forced to take the mark or not take the mark. The Bible teaches that. And to take the mark is to worship the beast, is to worship Antichrist. There's no healing from that. There's no salvation from that. To not take the mark comes with great tribulation, beheaded, martyred for your faith and resistance against the Antichrist. And you're seeing all this in society today with vaccine passports and biometrics and AI and all of these crazy things. Technology around the world couldn't have done this a couple hundred years ago. Today, they have the biometric ability to plant chips or marks in people that AI can track in these super AI systems. And you even saw this a little bit in 2020 and 2021 with the vaccine passports, didn't you? If you didn't have a vaccination passport, you couldn't go to the market in France or other places. You were rejected if you didn't have showing proof. And so there seems to be some sort of biological connection too. Look at Revelation 16:2. It says, a foul and loathsome sore came upon the men who had the what? The mark of the beast and those who worshiped his image. Something's going to happen to people's bodies who take the mark. Be careful what you inject or put in your body. But this will be horrible things on planet Earth. Where does the rapture fit into all of this? Is the bride raptured in the middle of it all? At the end of it all? At the beginning of it all? Well, I certainly have my view, and I'm going to tell you right now. I definitely don't believe it's the middle or the end. For one clear reason. Jesus said no one can know the day or the hour. And according to the 70 weeks of Daniel, as soon as the Antichrist performs the peace treaty, all you have to do is count down the days, and you get to the middle, and count down the days, and you get to the end. So you would know the day or the hour. Now, that's one argument. Another is, if you do a study of the book of Revelation, chapters 6 through 19 talk about the tribulation period. There's not one mention of the church, not one in any of those chapters. There's almost 20 mentions of the church in the first 3 chapters. And then when the Bible starts talking about the tribulation, no mention of the church. Why? The church has been raptured. The bride is gone. Another thing to say about that is, what loving husband knowingly sends his bride into wrath? A loving husband doesn't do that. And you have pictures of this in the Old Testament. Before the flood was poured out in Genesis 6, Enoch was what? Raptured. He was taken out. And Noah and his family were protected in the ark as wrath was poured out. In Sodom and Gomorrah, before judgment was poured out, Lot and his family were what? They were removed before wrath was poured out. And so look at these verses with me today. 1 Thessalonians 5. Concerning the times and the seasons, brethren, you have no need that I should write to you. For you yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord comes as a thief in the night. Pause there. Jesus is coming back, and when he comes back, it's going to be a surprise, like a thief in the night. We weren't expecting it, but we're going to clarify that right now. Because the next verse, 1 Thessalonians 5:3, for when they, right, not the church, when other people say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them, as labor pains upon a pregnant woman, they shall not escape. So for those who don't know Christ, it's going to be like a thief in the night. It's going to catch them off guard, just like the flood did in Genesis 6 with Noah, just like Sodom and Gomorrah. No one was expecting it, and it caught them off guard. What does Jesus tell us regarding this? Luke 21, for it will come as a snare on all those who dwell on the face of the earth. Watch, therefore, and pray always that you may be counted worthy to what? Escape all these things that will come to pass. Jesus says they will come to pass, and you pray that you know me so that you can what? Escape. Why would he tell you to pray that if that wasn't a possibility? 1 Thessalonians 5:4, but you, brethren, are not in darkness, so this day should overtake you as a thief. That's an interesting clarification. The Lord's going to come like a thief in the night. To those who don't know him, it's going to appear drastic, quick, like a thief. But to the church, it's not like a thief. For God did not appoint us to wrath. And in the book of Revelation chapter 3, look what Jesus says to the church of Philadelphia. He says this in verse 10, because you have kept my command to persevere, I will also keep you from the hour of trial, which shall come upon a little bit of the earth, the whole earth, to test those who dwell on the earth. Behold, I am coming quickly. Jesus says not just any type of trial, the hour of trial, and not just in one location, but upon the whole earth. He says, you're going to escape that. You pray that you would be worthy to be kept from that I will keep you from the hour of trial. And then he says this, Jesus in Matthew 24, this great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor shall ever be. Friends, people need Jesus. They need the gospel. I want to close today by looking at Israel. This is our final section today. How does all this tie to Israel? If the church is gone and there's a bunch of difficult stuff on planet Earth, where does Israel fit into all of this? That's what we close today with. Now, Israel's been around for a long time. In AD 70, the Romans came in and destroyed Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and the Jews were dispersed. And they've been dispersed for roughly 1,900 years. The only people group on planet Earth to have this happen, where they've been nomadic and living in Russia and America and different places all over the world, Jews, for 1,900 years. And during much of that time, Israel was actually a bit of a wasteland. The trees were scarce, crops wouldn't grow, different people groups would come and go and make claim on it, the Arabs, the Ottomans, different people, but there really wasn't much growing there. And later you can read Ezekiel 36, it was prophesied that the land would become desolate, and when God brings his people back, he would replant the land. And you know what happened in 1948 when Israel got the land back? All of a sudden, good stuff is growing, crops and lush. Have you eaten the tomatoes over there in Israel? Oh, they're fantastic. It's lush. They're now finding oil reserves over there they didn't know they had before. Technology is coming out of Israel. It was a desert wasteland, as Ezekiel 36 prophesied it would be, until God's people claimed the land again, and then it started sprouting with lush crops.
You've been listening to the voice of Pastor Chris Wimberly here on Expounding the Word. Pastor Chris is taking us through 1 Corinthians, and there's much more we want to gain from this book. There's a verse from the famous love chapter in 1 Corinthians, and it states, "Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I have become sounding brass or a clanging cymbal." What this verse is getting at is that even if you have the most flowery, super spiritual language, but your actions are not portraying the love of Christ, you're no different than a loud brass cymbal banging and offending the senses. That's not to say that cymbals being played alongside an orchestra or complementing the rest of what's being heard are not a benefit, but by themselves can be jarring to the senses. And that's the point being made. If you speak eloquently and say all the right things, but the way you behave towards others directly contradicts that, it's jarring to the person receiving it. Everything should be done in love. Whether you're expressing appreciation, whether you're correcting an area of sin, whether you're communicating a difference of opinion, it should still be done in love. As we continue on in the book of 1 Corinthians, be looking for ways that Paul showed and expressed his love for the Corinthian church, and take note of these examples to apply in your own life. How can you be one who extends love to another today? For more information on this ministry, go to SelahHillsChurch.com. This has been Expounding the Word.